First of all, do you know that God was going to kill Moses? Do you know why? Exodus chapter 4, verses 24 through 26. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me, she said. So the Lord let him alone. At that time she said bridegroom of blood, referring to circumcision. Well, before we get into this, one thing you might be thinking is, how could the Lord be standing in front of Moses? Again, that's for another time. But as far as this passage, what is it Moses had done that was so terrible that God was ready to kill him? He hadn't circumcised his son. That's it? Yes, that is it. God required all male children to be circumcised according to the covenant promise that he had made with Abraham. And even though Moses didn't know about this law, God was about to hold him accountable for it anyway, even at the point of taking his life. Second point about Moses, Passover. Now, I know you know all about Passover, but I want to highlight something maybe you don't know or haven't thought about. What was it that caused God's judgment to pass over the homes of the Israelites and not over the homes of the Egyptians? Was it because the Israelites were Jewish? Was it because the Israelites were basically good people? Let's find out what God says caused his judgment to pass over. Exodus chapter 12, verses 1 through 14. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, "This month is to be for you the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you must take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the people of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and the tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. That same night they are to eat the meat roasted over the fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or cooked in water, but roast it over the fire, head, legs, and inner parts. Do not leave any of it till morning. If some is left till morning, you must burn it. This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. On that same night I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn, both men and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you." So, what does God say here? He says when he saw the blood, he would pass over. Judgment would not come to the house of anyone whose entryway was covered by the blood of the Lamb. And if the house did not have the blood on the door, Egyptian and even Jew, no blood, no protection from judgment. Also, it required the blood of an innocent substitute to avoid God's judgment. This substitute had to be pure and spotless, no defect. It couldn't just be any blood. It had to be this specific blood. Why? Well, we'll see a little later. But again, the point is, we see here vicarious substitutionary avoidance of God's judgment upon us. Also, it will be a sign for you. What? Wasn't it a sign for God so his judgment would pass over the house? No. It was a clear sign for all generations of the children of Israel to see. The blood of the pure and spotless Lamb would cover us and protect us from God's judgment. Not our goodness, and not even just any old blood, but the blood of an innocent, worthy substitute was required to protect us from the judgment of God. Finally, actually point number 3, through Moses, God gave the law to the Israelites. And all throughout the law, one theme is very clear. Sacrifices and offerings must be given, and given really frequently. And those sacrifices and offerings were for the most part made to atone for sins. And those sacrifices and offerings almost always involve the shedding of the blood of an innocent substitute. Perhaps the most well-known of these was what was prescribed for Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. Unlike the other sacrifices, this one was only done once a year, and it was done to make atonement for all of the sins of the people. It could only be performed by the appointed high priest of Israel, and it always involved the shedding of blood of an innocent substitute. If we just focus on the Yom Kippur sacrifices, even though the others were required to be far more frequently, like every week, every festival, every time someone sinned, etc. It's ridiculous how often they were required. But just focusing on Yom Kippur, we learn a number of things about the subject of atonement. First and most important, it required an innocent substitute. And I'm going to read Leviticus chapter 16 to you. It is all about Yom Kippur, and it is where we're going to learn these very important truths about atonement.